Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Just want to introduce myself. I'm Kimberly Saunders, the president of the Central Florida chapter of the National Black MBA Association. And on behalf of our entire executive board, we welcome you to tonight's Men's Forum. Just want to make sure that all of the attendees that you are aware that we have a question and answer box. We do want to make sure that any questions that you have over the next hour and 15 minutes, that you know that you will be able to ask them. So please put those questions in the Q&A box. And then also, we would like for you to be interactive in the chat box. So if there's anything that you would like to comment on that any of our panelists or moderator may hit on, we definitely welcome you to have conversations within the chat box as well. So I just want to give a little precursor to the event tonight. So in the month of March was Women's History Month, and we had a panel of wonderful, dynamic women leaders in the community as well as within their careers. So we just wanted to repeat that this evening with a panel of dynamic men that are in leadership positions, both within their careers as well as in the community. So we hope to share as much love with them as we did with our ladies a couple of months ago. And again, we definitely want to welcome you. So with that being said, I am going to introduce our facilitator for this evening and turn it over to the gentleman. But again, we thank you, we welcome you for joining us. If you happen to miss anything, or if you want to go back and watch it, this is recorded and it will be on our YouTube page. So that way you can go back, rewatch the program, as well as share with others that you think could really use the information that was given this evening. So without further ado, I am going to introduce Mr. Eugene Campbell. He is going to be our facilitator for this evening. And he's also a past president of the Central Florida chapter. So we want to bring him back to keep him involved with the chapter. So we appreciate everything that you have assisted to build the foundation. And I'm going to turn it over to you. So it's all yours.
Thank you, Kimberly, and good evening, everyone. It's definitely a pleasure to be back with the Black MBA family for an event such as this, and really excited and honored, quite honestly, to have been asked to moderate this conversation. I wish times and circumstances were different and we could have done this in person. It would have been a wonderful reunion. I know that it is long overdue for so many of us who are members of National Black MBA Association to get back together and reconnect and fellowship with each other, because that is so important. But nonetheless, we're going to continue to do that in the virtual sense. And this discussion this evening is intended to help facilitate and deliver upon that continual relationship that exists between all of us. So for those who don't know me, I'm currently sort of in the middle of a gap transition period where I was, until very recently, a few weeks ago, the Director of Supplier Diversity and Sustainable Procurement for Allstate Insurance Company. And prior to that, I was a senior executive at the Walt Disney Company, which is what ultimately brought me to the Orlando and Central Florida community, where I led supplier diversity, community relations, corporate citizenship, and minority business development, and so much more. So it's an interesting opportunity. I'm not able to quite yet discuss all of the details as it pertains to my next step. It's very exciting, and I hope that you all will, stay abreast, and we're already connected via LinkedIn and other social media forums. When the time is right, I'll certainly be prepared to share. But Central Florida is such a wonderful community with so many leaders across so many different professions. And tonight we have the blessing of having some of those leaders join us for this conversation around leadership. And so I'd like to introduce first Thomas Francisco, who will, I believe, come on board. And Thomas is the institutional business manager for the Orlando North Cardiovascular Division of Bristol Myers Squibb. He is a consummate sales professional, has been so for over 20 years, and has also served in other similar organizations to National Black MBA, in particular, serving as the former president of the Orlando National Sales Network chapter and member of the board of directors currently to that organization. He's also a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. So thank you so much, Thomas, for your service to our country. But certainly from that perspective, is well suited and well equipped as a subject matter expert on the topic of leadership. And so really looking forward to having him part of the conversation as he shares both professionally and personally with us. Also joining us for the conversation is Dr. Eric Moore. Dr. Moore is the CEO and medical director of Moore Medical Group. And he also serves as the executive medical director for Advent Health Hospice of Central Florida. Dr. Moore obviously is incredibly busy, and I'm sure just up to his eyeballs, trying to keep us all safe and healthy, and keep our community safe and healthy. He has a very interesting background. He's born in Chicago, Illinois, but has Southern roots by virtue of growing up and being raised in both Tennessee and the Georgia area. He has wonderful breadth of experience, not only in the healthcare profession, but in a host of other areas, including running business, and has that unique perspective. So really looking forward to chatting with all of you and learning about you. I'll pass it to you, Thomas, first. Anything that you would like to share that I did not frame up as part of your introduction?
Eugene, you did a fantastic job. The only other thing I would add as far as my leadership is my family. And being a father of three boys. I have a 14-year-old, a rising freshman at Ocoee High School. And then I have two twins, boy that are 10 years old. And last but not least, certainly not least, I have a loving wife, Carol Stewart Francisco, who's also a medical doctor in the area. And those are where a lot of my energies go, and my life really centers around that.
Awesome. Yeah, as we were preparing, in full disclosure, I shared with Thomas that he and I have some commonality in terms of being fathers of twins, and we can share offline some notes in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes along with that. And I also have all boys as well, so totally have kindred spirits there. Dr. Moore or Eric, about how about anything that I missed that you would really want to make the audience aware of as we frame up this conversation?
Sure, thanks, Eugene. I appreciate that warm introduction. And just like Thomas, my life definitely is surrounded and empowered by family. I guess I'm probably a little bit older than you guys, so my kids are a bit older. Looking forward to driving up to my alma mater, my HBCU, next week to take my daughter to start her freshman year in college at Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama. And I also have a 15-year-old son who I am encouraging strongly to attend Oakwood as well when it gets to that point. But the family is definitely my support, my wife, my kids, and we're just trying to live the best life we can. It's surprising to me. I thought about the other day. I moved to Orlando directly from medical school in Augusta, Georgia, 30 years ago, and in 1991. And so been in this community for a while. Now I'm one of the old docs that I used to be mentored by years ago.
That's so interesting. I actually have family in Augusta, so that's not far from the roots of my family. And I think that what's so interesting that you all both have touched upon and that we've touched upon here, I think at the very beginning is, one of the immediate and probably earliest dimensions of leadership, certainly for everyone, but also for men, is rooted within the family structure. I interestingly hear a very common thread that exists there, where that's our foundation, that's our sort of, training ground, where we can sort of, fail in a no-fail zone or fail safely, and yet, have the love and nurturing in order to course correct. So just interested to hear from either of you. I know this isn't necessarily one that we've talked about, but we're going to be nimble. We're going to adapt in this conversation. I warned you how I roll in terms of conversations. So here's the first one, right? Tell us about how you maybe sort of got trained in terms of not being afraid of leadership, especially as a male and a Black man in particular. From the foundation of family.
I'll start with that one. Like most of us, I grew up in the church. My father is a AME pastor, or retired minister. And, a lot of times there being a child, you want to go hide in the back. You want to go to that back pew. But being the son of a minister or the pastor of the church, I had to sit up front with the first lady. So, started off in the church, really, speaking, reading hymns and reading scripture. And from that point on, some of the youth activities I was able to, be involved in. And my leadership journey really started there with the YPDers and taking on responsibility, and also being the oldest child. I had to try to keep my siblings in line so I didn't get in trouble, because as one goes, all goes. So that's the beginning of my leadership journey.
Eric?
I promise you we didn't plan this, but my dad also is a minister for 40 something years. And just like Thomas, that's where it started. Dad, he was a World War II vet. He grew up in Brooklyn during the Depression. Had to scrape and scrap, to make a way. So by the time we came along, he didn't play, and he created a lot of opportunities for leadership for us. He was actually, as I was growing up, he really wasn't a pastor, but he was more of an administrator for our church, and he was in charge of summer camps for kids, as well as community service. And so he combined that, utilized his 3 boys to help him on every occasion. He converted a recreational vehicle into a mobile medical van back in the 60s. And we were certainly the people that took care of that van by cleaning it up whenever he brought it back. But certainly he also took that van up to the Poor People's March in 1968, Resurrection City. And you can actually see that on photos from the marches and that type of thing. So we were surrounded by that type of thing. He also got us involved in helping with the health screenings that would take place. Me and my older brother are both physicians. As a result of, Dad really getting us involved in that. But I think where I really can pinpoint an area where he really shoved me into leadership was in one of his summer camps. I probably was 12 years old and the counselors were like 15, 16, but he made me a counselor at that age, and I was barely older than the campers themselves, but I learned a lot. And I learned that, sometimes you don't know what you can do until you're forced to do it. And so definitely as a child, family was a part of that nurturing and development for leadership.
Yeah, let's sort of continue to build on that thread a little bit in terms of, now we're moving from childhood, we're moving into young manhood, we're moving into, that phase where, us men start, feeling ourselves, smelling ourselves, as the old folks say. We start smelling ourselves when we get to college, and we start feeling like we're all of that and everything. And so and then let's even take it a step further, and we become young professionals. So I want to sort of step through the maturation, and through obviously every one of those progressions, we're expected to demonstrate leadership. However, there are the surroundings and the dynamics of the surroundings that have different pressures that aren't necessarily family oriented anymore, right? Whether it be the workplace, whether it be school, whether it be other friends who aren't like family who we grew up with. As you've done that, what have you learned? What that you still apply even to this very day, right? In terms of leadership practices, or on the flip side, failures. Because I think what's really important here is, not that everyone's going to have the same path that we have, but we gain wisdom from all these different pieces, at least in my opinion, and we sort of create this mosaic. So I'd love to understand some of the piece parts that maybe the two of you and even myself, can relate to or share, with folks in terms of, things that were learned along the way, along your journey, and that you're still learning now. That's so important in the vein of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always tried to find a mentor. From the time I was going through officer candidate school, and I became a second lieutenant, I always wanted to find someone who and identify successful people, because I always believe that success leaves breadcrumbs, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you can definitely improve upon the wheel. So I've always sought mentorship. I've always sought a environment where I, like-minded people, such as Black MBA, NSN. You look for organizations and people who are in line with what your aspirations are. And so I learned a lot of lessons from having mentors, from having sponsors, from being around like-minded people, because as we all know the phrase, iron sharpens iron. Right. And that was something that rang true to me from an early age. I remember my mom used to say, I don't know if you guys can remember, back in the day, there was a commercial about consultants, and it was a consultant firm called E.F. Hutton.
Yep.
And
ourselves, we all got this break. We got this wisdom thing going on.
Yeah, exactly. And I always patted myself to be, someone that was well read. So I would always try to study and learn as much as I can about whatever the subject matter or situation I was in, so that I would be able to, whenever I did speak, I would speak from a position of knowledge.
Mhm.
And so I sought out people that had that same mindset and had that idea of being an authority figure or being a leader. And at the same time, I didn't mind being a follower if there was a good leader in place.
Mhm. Yeah, Eric, what about you?
You know, when I look back at my maturation and growth, it was a very unique environment. As Eugene said, I was born in Chicago, but don't have any recollection of that because Dad picked us all up and moved down to Nashville, Tennessee, and so that's where I really grew up. And it was such a unique environment. Riverside Hospital was a Black-run, Black-owned hospital in Nashville, Tennessee, on the banks of the Cumberland River, just over the river from Meharry Medical College. Riverside Hospital had Black physicians, Black nurses, Black physical therapists, everybody in the hospital. And it was on a campus, and the folks that stayed on the campus worked at the hospital. Next to the hospital was our church. Next to the hospital was the office where my dad and my mom was my dad's secretary, as he, led out in his administrative duties. And our school was on the campus. So we were in a bubble of excellence, of just growing up in that environment. You were held to a higher standard. And as we look back, many of the children that grew up there are now healthcare professionals, many doctors. We didn't know that we couldn't do it until we came outside of that bubble. And we saw, administrators, we saw all sorts of leaders. My dad's boss, I call him the original OG. We just happened to live next door to him, but he was an excellent leader. But he was my Uncle Dud as well, right? So they'd come home, we'd see him, we'd go give him a hug, whatever. But what he showed me, even as a young child, is that you don't have to be flashy, you don't have to be boisterous, loud, act like you're the man. He loved people. He could remember the names of so many of the parishioners from Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi. But he was a very effective leader. Back then, the conference there owned an apartment complex in Nashville. They owned a nursing home in Huntsville. And so, being surrounded by that, that it was a tremendous opportunity for leadership. And so even as a child in Nashville, various opportunities to do some things in leadership. We then moved to Atlanta, where Dad continued to work in leadership. And that was a different environment for me. It really thrust me into the majority environment. I was the only Black child in the school that I went to. The area that we moved to, Decatur, anybody knows the Atlanta environment, back in the mid 70s, Decatur was white, and we were like the second Black family in the neighborhood. So I was surrounded. So it was a learning experience, but I think it helped me to see the rest of the world, right? Nashville was somewhat of a bubble. What I did learn in Atlanta was the beginnings of my business career and entrepreneurship. started cutting lawns, and had clients and that type of thing. I was always working because I wanted to buy clothes and do what I wanted to do. So then I went to a boarding academy in the 11th and 12th grade in the foothills of the Georgia mountains up in Calhoun, Georgia, which was one of the most awesome experiences I've had. Black and white students really learned how to be a leader there in the midst of that. I was a class vice president my senior year.
Hey, Eric,
And
have you had any instances where you, throughout leadership, it didn't go the way that you wanted it to go? For example, you know, you dealt with failure, you dealt with falling short and something other than success. I know, for example, from my standpoint, there was a time earlier in my career. So my undergraduate degree is in aerospace engineering. So when I graduated from college, early young engineer working for a defense contractor, I'm thinking I know my stuff and whatever. And I kind of had this maybe swagger and different level of confidence. And it took some failure and missing the mark to quite honestly bust my bubble and let me know that leadership takes on other dimensions, not just along the lines of success. So, I'm interested, I think it's relevant for the audience to understand both ends of the spectrum. In particular, if you understand where you haven't been maybe as successful or you've made mistakes, what do you need to do to course correct in order to stay on the right side of leadership? Thomas, I want to throw this, maybe if you could sort of kick this off and then we can kind of, swing back to Eric on it as well.
Well, failure is just another opportunity to try to succeed. But I've definitely
wait, say that again. That was pretty profound.
Failure is just another opportunity to try to succeed.
Failure is another opportunity to try to succeed. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Early in my military career, I was I'll give you a little background. So I went through the officer candidate school, and I went into the military initially. I was an enlisted soldier, and so I qualified and I was able to go to a program called OCS, Officer Candidate School. We had admitted into the initial class, there were 100 of us. Within 1 week, there were 55 of us. Within probably a month, there were 25 of us. So you can understand the rate of attrition. Only the strong would survive. But the failure I had was I actually was the honor council president of my cohort. And I had at that time I had this propensity to sometimes procrastinate. And I turned in a report 15 minutes late. Again, 15 minutes late.
But late.
Nonetheless, I had to write a report about the Battle of Antietam. The Battle of Antietam goes back to the Civil War and how if Custer had made it there on time, we may be living in a different country right now. So thank God he was late too. But the failure was the embarrassment of being the honor council president and then being demoted because I failed to get my work turned in on time. It really changed my perspective, and it made me realize, and I was telling Sandra, I mean, Kimberly, before you guys came on, I'm always early to this day. That was 35 years ago. But to this day, I will not be late. I mean, if I've got to, whatever I've got to do, I will not be late. And it's because that failure taught me a lesson. And then even in my professional career, you know, you talk about having swagger and thinking you know all that you know. And you know, I went to an event with my team, and in all honesty, we were not prepared to meet the moment. And again, that taught me a lesson too, is not just you need to be prepared, but you need to be prepared for the unexpected. Because although you may have an agenda, things change. And if you're not able to pivot and make those adjustments, you will come up short. And so that took me to the next level of doing more research prior to and being prepared for the unexpected to prevent shortcomings.
Wow.
So
this what you just said is deep and such a perfect segue. You know, back to Eric, and I'm going to now put it in the context of Dr. Moore, because talk about dealing with the unexpected. I mean, we're living that. We've been living that. We still are living that. And yet leadership needs to prevail. Leadership is what gets us out of where we were and is the pivot. It's the path to the pivot in order to get to where we need to be. And so that's why I asked the question around sort of like, you know, failure or mistakes, because you're spot on, Thomas, in terms of it being an opportunity, you know, to succeed, a path to a different outcome, because all of this is about consequences. There was a consequence that you suffered, that demotion, for not getting stuff done on time. There's a consequence associated that leaders are always having to sort of process. So Dr. Moore, if you could talk about, for example, what trait maybe you've seen that can be detrimental to someone seeking leadership positions or leadership opportunities, so that our audience can sort of keep that in mind and say, don't go there, right? I don't want the consequence. I don't want the outcome. What learning would you share, or what traits maybe, you know, have you observed or are aware of?
Oh, wow. I almost think to be more effective is to say what traits that I see in great leaders. If you study leaders, you know, kind of going back to the failure thing, every great leader has had tons of failures, right? It is those failures, you know, you learn more from failing than you do succeeding.
that's true.
When you mess up, you learn so much. And the leader takes that mess up or that failure, analyzes it, ingests it, learns from it, and builds on top of it, right? So that they don't go through that again. And that creates even more success when they do that. And leadership is such a continuum. You never stop learning, you know, on the leadership journey. But I think the things that, you know, Thomas talking about being on time. If I tell my kids, you know, if you don't do anything else, be on time. People are looking at you every day and they see, you know, what type of person you are. And if you're showing up late all the time, that's a huge disqualifier. People will X you out just because you're not on time. If you do not listen to people, right? If you feel like you have all the answers and you feel like I'm going to do it my way or the highway, eventually you're going to fail because you don't know everything. Good leaders surround themselves with great people and they listen to them. They may not do exactly what they suggest or want to do, but you have to listen. Servant leadership to me is the most powerful type of leadership. You go into it not wanting to necessarily be the boss, but to exact the vision and mission and accomplish it through the people that are working with you. And so more of the things that I think a good leader does, more so than what they shouldn't do, it's been my experience, because different leaders are different. They have their own personalities and that type of thing. But one thing that I did learn reading a particular book years ago, the book Good to Great. I don't know if everyone has read that book by Jim Collins, but it talks about level 5 leadership. And I was always intrigued by, the characteristics of those leaders, not showy people, not bossy, not egomaniacs, certainly high value internally in terms of how they thought of themselves, but they really were pretty low key. You could not out persevere them.
Right.
And that has been my journey. I'm not the smartest person. When I got to college, that's when I started seeing failure, right? I had never gotten a C in high school. When I got to college and met all those Black geniuses coming from all around the country, and and realized I was not the smartest kid anymore. So I learned from that, but you can't out persevere me.
One of the things that's so interesting with what you just said there is, something that I learned is that leaders, really, really effective, strong leaders, are very attuned. And I'm going to sort of use some of what you just said and maybe reframe it. They're very attuned to who they are and what their strengths as well as weaknesses are. And they build a cast of people around them who complement that. They don't build people who have the same strengths. They actually seek for talent that they themselves don't possess. So that requires a level of self-awareness, which is something that I hear really strong coming from what you just said, Eric. Self-awareness of what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And now how can I surround myself around those other brilliant geniuses who have strengths in areas that I don't have, and collectively, right, we're all trying to move this boulder up the same hill with even greater collective strength. That's what real leadership is. So you have to be prepared to sort of step outside of yourself. And Thomas, another thing you said earlier, and maybe this comes from, I think it comes from your military background, leaders also have to know how to follow. Because the first step of leadership is basically followership. You've got to be able to follow somebody in order to emulate and put forward the right type of attraction, magnetism, where someone wants to follow you, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Thomas, anything to that? And then we're going to, I want to, hopefully get some opportunity for audience engagement, I think, here in the next couple of minutes. But Thomas, please hook on to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading a book about leadership with Elon Musk and with Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs. And they did exactly what you just mentioned. They knew what their strengths were, but they also identified their opportunities, and they were able to get in their leadership team people who can shore up those different areas that they were not as strong in, and that's why they became the titans that they are. And I do this exact same thing. I love to get books that talk about leadership. Leadership is like my Zen spot. You know, my wife and I, we talk about this all the time, but you have to know your strength.
Yeah.
In other words, I always say, and this again in the military, you have to know your lane. All right. If you stay in your lane, then you don't
I thought
get.
my wife only said that. She keeps telling me, stay in your damn lane.
But my illustration is, if you stay in your lane, then you don't get in an accident, because you're not gonna bump into the car on the right. You're not gonna bump into the car on the left. So understand your lane. And then the other thing I always say is master your sandbox. Again, these are some things that come from the military, but they are definitely things I use in my professional life. Understand your sandbox. When I go in and we're discussing opportunities with physicians, I don't know a tenth of what Dr. Moore knows, but I know what I know.
Right.
And what I know is what I'm going to master. So when Dr. Moore comes and talks to me or any of my reps, we understand exactly what we need to convey to him in order for him to support us. And that's the essence of what you were saying, is know your strength, know your lane, but also understand what opportunities are out there that you need to shore up in order to be successful.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I love it. I think, and I'm seeing, you know, some exciting inquiries. So Kimberly, we'll pivot back to you here.
Awesome, thank you so much. So what we will do is we will just take a quick break. I am going to talk about a couple of things just to give the panelists some time to grab a swig of water, and give you all an opportunity to win a conference pass to the National Black MBA Conference and Career Expo that will be coming up in September, pretty soon, a couple of weeks away. So
we will be getting to the questions, because I'm seeing some really intriguing questions that I want us to jump on.
Absolutely. So definitely keep the questions coming so that we can get to those. I am going to share a quick video and talk a little bit about National Conference, and we will have our first raffle. Our second raffle, because we want you to stay on till the end, will be at the end of the event tonight, but we're going to go ahead and call one lucky winner. So I'm going to share a quick video, and then we will resume with part 2.
In a year like no other, the National Black MBA Association held an annual conference like no other. Not an event that took place in one city, but a virtual experience that reached across the country and around the world. For our 20,000 members and countless supporters, our annual conference is the chance to interview, engage, learn, and grow. Going virtual didn't slow us down. From our state-of-the-art online platform in our 50th year serving Black professionals, we brought together today's leading Black voices and career representatives from nearly 200 organizations, including some of the world's most recognizable brands, were on hand to interview our next generation of leaders. Over the course of 3 days, our 50th anniversary theme, Celebrating Visionaries, came to life for nearly 10,000 conference registrants, giving them the tools, resources, and motivation to become more successful. As always, the NBMBAA Conference and Career Fair educated, connected, and inspired Black professionals. More importantly, this year's conference demonstrated that no matter the obstacles, no matter the challenges, we as a community have the power to move forward, succeed, and realize our limitless potential.
All right, so that was last year's conference. Unfortunately, it had to be fully virtual, but this year there is a hybrid option. So for those of you that are ready and prepared to be in person in Chicago, that's where it will be held on September 14th to the 18th. And I'm going to share another slide so that way everyone will see that. So it will be 14th to the 18th in Chicago, Illinois. we will have an in-person as well as a digital option. So for those of you that are not able to travel or not ready to travel, feel welcome to still attend. You will still have full access to all of the educational programs, the Meet the Experts, as well as the Career Expo. And I will say, for those of you that have attended before, and for those of you that have not attended, this is the national conference. If you haven't attended anything else, this is the one to attend, especially if you are on the job hunt, if you are a new graduate and you're looking for, to get your foot in the door, or if you are an experienced professional. There are hundreds of companies, Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 1000 companies that attend this event because they know the quality of the members that they will get, the quality of the candidates that they will get from this conference. So you have an opportunity to attend, whether it's in person, there will be live individuals that are there from various companies, as well as the virtual option. Also, if you're looking to volunteer, this is a great opportunity to volunteer, and you win rewards for volunteering. So every year, National Conference looks for volunteers to assist, and with that, you're able to win passes and also passes for next year's conference registration. So again, if anyone needs any more information about that, check out the website, nbmbaa.org/conference, and you will be able to see the lineup of speakers that are in store for this year. All right, so without further ado, we are going to have our first raffle. So we're going to do a Wheel of Fortune type deal. And let me pull that up. All right, so this is called the Wheel of Names. So on this Wheel of Names, everyone that registered, some of you all or some of the registrants were not able to hop on, so that's too bad for them. They won't win one of the two passes that we will be giving away. So I'm going to spin it. Whoever is present and wins, what I will do is follow up after tonight's event, and then I will get you the code and all the information that you will need to register for the event. If you would like to pass on the event, if you don't think that you will utilize it, because we do want a lucky winner to take advantage of this opportunity, please let me know so that way we can award it to another participant. All right, here we are. Darby Israel, I believe. So congratulations, Darby. We're going to remove you for the next round. Is Darby, let me just make sure he is on the call. Yes, he is on. So Darby, you have won a pass to the national conference. I will definitely follow up with you afterwards. So congratulations, Darby. Okay, so that was a brief break. Hope you all enjoyed that Wheel of Fortune with Vanna Black. So we are going to resume with part 2. I'm going to turn it back over to Eugene. Definitely, if you've had any questions that you want to ask, please do so. We have about another 25 to 30 minutes for our panelists, so please get those questions in. Any comments, we want to make sure that while we have these wonderful gentlemen on the call tonight, that we ask those questions that have been pondering. So also stay tuned to the end. We'll do another Wheel of Names for another drawing for another conference pass. So back to you, Eugene.
Thank you. I'm digging. I'm really digging that Wheel of Names as a great team builder. So I will be, without any shame whatsoever, plagiarizing and stealing the utilization of that, because that was pretty cool. So well done, Kimberly.
Absolutely, it's free, so that makes it even better.
It's free. That's exactly right. Love it. So I've noted that. One of the questions that I really sort of took note on, let me scroll here and find it, is it's from Mimi, and it says tips on leading without authority, leading others in projects and initiatives who are in higher positions. That's a really interesting question, because it's really, I think it's far easier to lead when the org chart says you have responsibility. But leadership really is not because of command and control, in my opinion. And I'm going to, give my fellow participants here a chance to weigh in. But you really, I think, hone that expertise of leadership when, for example, to your point, there's no formal authority that exists. And so what I think is really key in that particular dynamic is making sure that you have clarity on sort of like the end game or the end state, the vision, and where you're trying to guide and direct. And the most important word for me that's been very effective is influence, because it's really about influencing others to buy in on a common objective or a common goal, regardless of reporting structure, regardless of having direct authority over people, right? So that's what really makes a difference between a leader and a supervisor, right? Supervisors, pecking order, right? You give orders, people take orders, right? But leadership is something at a whole different level, in my opinion. And you really need to understand that higher state in order to be effective and use things like influence and communication skills and building rapport and galvanizing people around common objectives. And Eric, any thoughts or perspective on that you would add to that particular question?
Yeah, I think it tracks back to my experience in terms of leadership and being a servant leader. But as I look back, so at Advent Health, I'm a part of a system, right? So I have thousands of bosses above me, and know that at some point that's a finite end to that opportunity, right? So to some people would think that this is a detrimental thing to do, but I've always felt that I need to train somebody to take my place, right? Because when you do that, you're first of all, you're being selfless. You believe in the organization and you want the organization to succeed. And so if you're doing a good job, you want whoever comes behind you to do the same and better. And so being selfless, looking at the mission and the goal. But now me as an entrepreneur, I tend not to think that way until I'm ready to retire or sell my business. But what I do believe, again, is to empower people. I love to see folks that work with me excel, and even to the point if they excel so much that they leave the organization and go on to do great things. I love that, because I want excellence around me and I want to learn from them. I want to do all of that. So being a authoritarian generally doesn't work well. And you get results from that, as you can see from the last administration. But are they positive results? Right? Are they the kind of results that are sustainable, that lift us in a positive way?
Yeah, that's a great point. Thomas, what do you have?
Well, fortunately, I've had and I'm sure you have too, Eugene, leading without authority. That's what we do as presidents of these organizations. And truly, you have to look at creating, setting expectations. Even when you are not, someone that can have some penal authority over someone, So you have to set expectations for the organization. You got to set goals, and you have to create a vision. And within that vision, it's not just you putting it together; it's the team putting it together and getting the buy-in to support the goals, support and help to create the vision. And it really sets a standard that these are what are the things that are expected of us. Whether you are in a civilian capacity or military capacity, leadership is something that people are attracted to. Strong leaders, people are it's like a magnet.
Right.
Right?
I want to work for that person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so
I want to be on their team. Yeah.
To Eric's point, the servant leader, you have to set the example when you're looking to lead without authority. Set that example. When you set the example and people look at you and they go, you know what? I don't care if I get paid. I want to follow that guy or that girl. And also you have to be inspirational in a sense to be able to be attuned enough to understand what motivates each person.
Yeah.
What motivates them. And then Eric said something that's very important, then empower them, right? When you find out what their strength is, what their motivation is, empower them to help you do that thing. Because again, we talked about this earlier, leaders have to know their lane, but they also have to understand the right and the left to fill the other lanes in order to push that organization to success.
Yeah.
And so that is my take on leading without authority.
Yeah. It's so interesting because there's just been so much upheaval in a negative sense. And in an odd way, there's also been so much positive that has come from all of that upheaval. And, it really creates a unique environment where, stress is at an all-time high for folks at all levels. And so I want to touch upon, this topic that we had sort of kicked around when we were brainstorming in terms of, for example, the importance of mental health and the impact of effective leadership. And oh, how prophetic, here we are. I don't know how many of you are following the Olympics, but Sister Simone Biles, literally 24 hours ago is the living, breathing example of this notion of an intersection of mental health and how you manage wellness in the midst of effective leadership. Historically, those two have not coexisted, but we're now being schooled in real time in media by Sister Simone and Sister Naomi, right, in terms of the importance of that. And so this is inherent to leadership. And yes, what we've been going through over the past 18 to 24 months has accelerated that. So I want us to have a bit of the candid conversation in terms of, how leadership, has played out, in your opinion, and address some of the objections and even some of the criticisms, in particular in the, African-American community, that might, weigh into this. So I've said enough, but I want to now let you guys run with this.
I tell you, we all bear this burden because unlike our counterparts that are not melanated,
right,
we bear the burden of our entire culture, right? We do something that's all of y'all. and that isn't, one, we become stronger because of that, but we also have to recognize, and I think what Simone Biles is doing right now is so courageous. It's beyond comprehension, because she did what most of us are afraid to do, and that's just take a time out. I know, I've said this to Dr. Moore earlier tonight. I take my hat off to physicians right now, because they are dealing with something that is as stressful and is out of control. And unfortunately, they can't even take a time out sometimes because things are just going crazy. But Dr. Moore, when this is over, please take a time out, because I know what this is like for you guys. And I think we all need to do more of it. You know, even for myself, I know, Eugene, you probably had a situation where you got these deadlines and you got all this stuff to meet, and you finally get it and you get it done. But you know what? We don't stop. We go right on to the next thing. And in all honesty, as a society, as a culture, we need to realize that we need to take time just to decompress. We don't do that enough. We don't do that enough. And I'm glad that the level of attention that is being placed on this mental health is truly important. And we need to just be courageous enough in our own personal lives to say, I need time out. I tell you what I did over the course of COVID when we were at home, and I blocked time out. I made my own meeting so that nobody could put something on my calendar. I had time out every morning just to go walk. I had time out at between 12:30 and 1:30 just to be able to decompress. And I blocked out my calendar at the end of the day too, just so I could have those scheduled breaks, because we were all just stressed out. So I think it's something that we need to step up and be more courageous about, and do more, taking time out and realizing the importance of it.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I could talk forever on this subject, but I won't. But I will say a few things. You know, as you mentioned, the past 18 months, not only were we dealing with COVID, but we were dealing with what seems to recur way too often. And that's the tragedy of killing our people. So George Floyd, at some point, probably to everyone, felt like their cousin, their uncle, their brother. And you take that on. When you hear that, when you see someone taking the lives of one of your brothers or sisters, you grieve, whether they were part of your family or not. So we have been grieving for that. You probably know someone or have had a family member that's passed away as a result of COVID. I included. So the deal with mental health, guys, that tends to be, especially in Simone's case, overlooked, is that if you hurt your leg or your arm, right, you can put something on it, you can do something about it. You don't, you go sit down and relax. When there's something going on in your head, depression, anxiety, that type of thing, you can't get away from that. It affects you every minute of your day. And so it is a tremendous deal. And so in our community, historically, we have had to bear burdens. We have had to do what needed to be done despite what we see around us and what's going on in our lives. And we've internalized that. The church is probably the biggest institution in our community. And unfortunately, we have somewhat stigmatized mental health in terms of you don't have enough faith, my brother or my sister. You just need to go home and pray about that thing. Or you go and see the pastor who has no counseling background or training to counsel you on something. Folks, throw all that stuff away. Go get help. If you need therapy, find a therapist, find a physician, get that help, because it is real. I've been through depression. I've been through anxiety. And just being able to talk to a professional about certain things is tremendous. We recently opened our new facility called Kaya Health, which combines primary care, psychiatry, and therapy all in the same office, because we know that that integrated mind, body, and spirit approach is what we believe to be integral to really wellness and healing. You cannot separate your mind from your body.
No.
You've got to address both areas.
You know, and one of the things that, you know, is so important for us to give as well as to receive is empathy. You know, so, you know, one of the comments in the thread speaks to this notion of, in the virtual environment, you know, what have leaders had to do differently to connect with those who they lead. I think, at least from my vantage point, I've needed to, and I've doubled down on empathy, both in terms of the empathy I give to those who are part of my team, part of my orbit, and my circles of influence where I have to work with and collaborate with on a regular basis. But back to Thomas's point, I have had to be very clear in saying I expect it in return, right? It can't be a one-way street. And I think that that's another dynamic of sort of leadership in action, is, you know, the give and the take. This is a sort of there's a mutuality that exists, because you cannot be a leader always giving away, because inevitably you will become depleted. There will be nothing left to give because you haven't given to yourself. I know this sounds blunt, and maybe I'm putting, you know, sort of the corporate hat on, but more than ever before, we come to realize that these corporations will continue to exist, whether we are here on this planet or not. And so we better wake up and recognize what we need in order to sustain and keep going for ourselves. And a lot of that really sort of, you know, begins, I think, with empathy. It goes, you know, such a very long way.
Jen,
Go ahead. I think
you made a very good point about, you know, in this environment, something that I learned. Again, leadership is a continuum. You're always learning. I thought I knew, you know, just about everything I needed to know to take care of my team in hospice. And what I learned back in May or June of last year is that, you know, our docs were at home on their laptops, and they were burning out quicker than they ever have, seeing patients and going into the hospitals and that type of thing. So what I realized is that they felt disconnected, because we would get together quite often. And so what I had to do was to make appointments with them weekly, right? So that we could see each other, we could talk, we could laugh, we could just commune with each other. And that really, I saw a huge difference in their performance and just their outlook. So being able to escalate your intentional communication with your folks during this time is huge.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think, you know, again, as Eugene was talking about the empathy, giving them permission to, you know, take a time out, because right now, when you think about how connected we all are, it's your phone, it's the social media. You know, you have to go to websites for stuff just to get the basic information. People want to text you. You know, you got Facebook and that book and the instant this and that and the other. You don't get a chance to mentally breathe. You know, and you have to, you know, someone said to me the other day, Thomas, I just texted you, man, and I said, what time was it? But if you texted me after 6 o'clock, bro, you go get that in the morning. know, I am intentional about that. I put my phone down.
Boundaries.
Not go to bed with me. Someone else does. You know? But you have to put this stuff down because otherwise you will be, it never stops. And like you said, you could drop dead tomorrow and it's just going to keep on going.
I mean,
you know? So you got to do it for yourself.
That's the reality. And
Yes,
Joseph S., one of the participants, asked this question that you just touched upon, Thomas, in terms of, how has this need to connect with social media platforms contributed negatively on our mental health? I think that, there's certainly some positives. Let's be balanced, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are some great positives and great things that exist because of and through social media and social platforms. However, left unmanaged or not managed appropriately, right, you can have some dire consequences, some unintended consequences that are not healthy. Same thing, in many ways that we've talked about previously. So I think that that's a great call out that you both have just made on that particular point. So, I know that like the three of us have like probably, all of this experience. I'm doing the math here, but kind of like between the three of us, we must be pushing close to collectively 100 years of experience and wisdom professionally. But that may not necessarily be reflective of our audience. We may have some brothers and sisters who are here who are, maybe a little bit younger and at a different sort of stage, within their journey. And, this sort of ties into something also that was in some of the Q&A chat feed in terms of, what characteristics maybe are missing among today's diverse, young, up and coming leaders. I'm going to sort of rephrase that a little bit, right? Because I believe that everyone has potential leadership, but it's, what you do about bringing that potential into the kinetic, and maybe this is the engineer in me, how do you transfer the energy from the potential phase into the sort of active kinetic phase, putting it into action? What's going on here? I know I'm having regular conversations with my young adults, my children, and Thomas, I'm sure you're doing the same thing. We all have. So any thoughts in terms of, what's really contemporary that needs to be top of mind?
I think resilience. I think that's a component I talk to my kids about all the time. I tell you, it's an acronym I use, and I'm sure you guys have heard it before, GRIT. You want to be, I tell them, you want to be growing. You want to do things that allow you to grow. You don't want to, I tell especially my rising freshmen, you don't want to max out in high school.
Yeah. Don't peak in high school. You still got what, 60, 70 more years of living to do.
Right. You don't want to max out there, and so you have to be resilient. You have to be resilient. And again, the I is innovative, or you have to look to find ways to get things accomplished, and don't let that first failure be something that cooks you in your place and doesn't allow you to move forward. And what really helps to put it all together is you have to want it. Something you have to be striving for, and that's the tenacity that you have to put in. So I have these conversations because what I see in a lot of the young people, because of the social media and what have you, that resilience, is not the same resilience that I feel I had coming along. Understanding that you're not going to be a superstar at everything, and you're going to have to be able to take those losses or take those L's, as they say, and bounce back. and you have to look to bounce back. And like I said before, failure is an opportunity to succeed.
Yeah.
So, you know, learn from your failures and try not to repeat them, but understand that if you didn't have those failures, you wouldn't know how good success feels.
Right.
So embrace that, you know, embrace those moments and take them in.
Two things on that. The two things I worry about with our young people today, you know, one is the seemingly lack of communication skills because of social media. If you're texting people all day, if you're on Instagram, Snapchat, they don't have to develop great communication skills, verbal skills, and leaders have to have that. That's one trait that I really place very high on the poll is communication. If you can't communicate to your people your vision and your mission, you know, as the Bible says, the people will perish. The second thing is that I have done nothing over these years counting success without God, right? That, you know, that should have been the first thing out of my mouth, because that was every step of the way, every failure. God said, okay, son, sit down, learn from this. And so I worry about our young people in terms of their relationships with God. Is the church still relevant to them? Is that Bible study? Is that learning? That stuff was life-changing for me and continues to be. So I just pray for our young people coming up. This is a different time. This is a different world. And you've got to have that foundation to really succeed.
Wow. Yeah, that's deep.
Amen.
So one thing I want to make sure that we touch upon here is, you know, we are Black men, and let's be real candid. A lot of times it feels like, and it is, the world's against us. And, you know, to be a leader, and a Black male leader, it is another one of those examples of the burden of the world is on the shoulders. And so how do you suggest that we all help each other? I love the fact that back in March, as Kimberly spoke, there was, you know, this similar discussion amongst the sisters, amongst the women. And that's not to say that, right, we are separate and exclusive from each other. I believe, as I've shared early on with you all, that the importance of allyship is so critical. And so I just want you all to maybe share some final brief comments here, because I know we're about to wrap up. And then I want to, after you're done, we'll turn it over to Kimberly to guide us. But if you could sort of, you know, hit that a little bit in terms of that leader's mentality in the context of, you know, Black men and our community, and what we, you know, look for and need from, you know, other allies, would be so important.
Yeah, I tell you, you hit the nail on the head with that, Eugene. Allies. You have to find someone, and your allies could be another brother, or your ally could be another sister. You need to find people that you can converse with, because the pressure is definitely there. You know, it's definitely there. So I would say, you know, form yourself a tight-knit group of friends or colleagues, or you know, I look at the church. I mean, I can honestly say, without my brothers from the church, I don't know what I would do. They've been there because they're non-judgmental. You don't need, you need that judgment-free zone. And I think in the church, you find that. I think maybe in some of your other organizations, you find it as well. But you have to find something like that where you can just be yourself and take off the veneer of who the world sees you as, and just be Thomas, Eugene, Eric.
Beautiful, beautiful. I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
When I look back in history, we were taught not to trust each other. We were taught to be at each other's throats. We were separated. That's in our DNA. It has come down through the years. I have found it very challenging to work with Black males in business, and I see the mistrust, right? And I, you know, I hate that with the so much in my heart, but I understand it. But what Thomas said is so true. Having a safe space to fellowship and communicate. Probably 5 years ago, guys that I went to high school and college with decided to come together and have a prayer group. We've been doing that for 5 years, every Sunday evening. It is our safe space. We talk, we laugh, talk about politics, talk about virtually everything. And when we leave, we feel empowered. And so connecting with folks that you know, you want to get to know, you may not know them. Step out. I think we have to start stepping out on faith and trusting each other. Start small and build it up, because you know, we are some powerful folks, man. I tell you, I have witnessed it up front. Our men and our women, such great thinkers. We think out of the box. We have to make do. So if we ever, you know, I forget who the person that said, you know, the thing that is most powerful that has been done to Black people is got them to not work together and not trust each other, because they understand our power.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to be able to do some things that we do. And I think this forum is such a great part of that and foundation. And I appreciate the National Black MBA Association.
So well said. So well said. So thank you guys. This was really a blast. And hopefully, you know I learned a lot. I've got just, you know, tons of notes here that I've been capturing, you know, throughout the conversation. You know, I won't do a full recap, but, you know, I think number one, surrounding yourselves around with like-minded individuals is absolutely mission critical. Whether you call them mentors, sponsors, advocates, friends, allies, whatever synonym you want to sort of attach to that, you better find some realness to have around you, because we don't go through this journey of life or the subset journey of leadership alone. And so recognize that sooner as opposed to later. And you're not gonna, and that circle doesn't have to be huge, right? Because there are gonna be a lot of people who will want to sort of have access to you. They're not really down for the cause. You're going to have to sort of use really keen discernment and judgment on who you really put into this circle around you. I think that this National Black MBA Association Central Florida chapter, I know it from the moment the chapter was founded, years before I even came to Orlando, to its existence today. This is exactly why this organization exists. And we need to assert that even more. And that is what then raises the boat, raises the tide for all of our boats collectively. So Kimberly and her leadership team, I congratulate you all for the hard work that you continue to do and encourage you to keep it up. It is not unnoticed. And we've been pleased to be part of this conversation. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Madam Chair, Madam President.
Thank you so much. And it's the last hour and a half just flew by. I don't know where the time went, but we will definitely have to bring all of you back, hopefully the next time in person. So that way we can do a little bit more networking. And, you know, as we do in our communities, you know, we like to give those side church hugs since we were talking about, right? So thank you all again for the attendees that were able to join in tonight. Just keep in mind that this is a recorded event, so we will make sure that this gets sent out on all of our social media and our website and our newsletter as well, so it will have greater reach. So that way you can share with your friends, colleagues, family members, and as well as look at it yourself again. So we are going to do one more raffle this evening, and we're going to go ahead and close out since we are 4 minutes past time. So if you just give me 2 more minutes to bring back up the wheel of names, and we will get a lucky winner. All right, Monique. So I think Monique is still with us. Yes, Monique Paul is still with us. So congratulations, Monique. You're the other winner of a conference pass. So I will follow up with you after this call or after we finish up with the event this evening to provide details on how to redeem that pass. And final words, again, thank you to Eugene for moderating this evening. Thank you to Dr. Moore and Mr. Francisco, our wonderful panelists, and the great words of wisdom that you have left with us. A couple of other things that I'm going to share just really, really quickly with you all before we leave. For those of you that are not aware of information about the Central Florida chapter, we're an organization that's committed to leading in education, wealth building, and growth opportunities for those that look like us. There's 40 chapters nationwide. Our local chapter has 175 plus members. We conduct roughly about 25 programs throughout the year. This is our executive board, so I always like to acknowledge the team that just keeps the wheels turning. And of course, you know, there's Black girl magic, but there's also Black man magic. And we want to acknowledge that tonight. So if there's anyone that has a desire to lead, to get into a leadership position for a nonprofit organization such as this, to even practice, right? This is a safe space to fail in order to succeed, right? So we welcome you to definitely reach out to us. Let us know of your interest in any of our leadership positions. If you are not a member, you can go to our website, CFLBlackMBA.org. These are the membership levels. So we have members, everyone from high school students in our Leaders of Tomorrow mentoring program through experienced professionals. So those are, you'll be able to find more information about membership levels on our website. And then last but not least, we always like to acknowledge our sponsors and thank our sponsors. So this year we have Charles Schwab, United Health Group, and Travel and Leisure as our 3 corporate sponsors. And if you are not already following our media pages, please do so. Our Facebook page, Instagram page, and LinkedIn page. And then if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, go on our website and make sure that you subscribe. So again, thank you all so much for your time this evening. Please share this information. Please share the event once we have it available to you over the next couple of days. And again, thank you to our panelists for this evening. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and healthy.